everyone. Welcome to today's episode. It's a very windy day. Hopefully, the wind doesn't disturb the audio. I wanted to begin by speaking about the concept of eternity and the concept of the temporary. And I was wondering about something strange that, we human beings, we acknowledge ourselves as temporary, but we're fascinated by the eternal. And I thought, what if there were eternal beings, but poetically, that were fascinated in the temporary? That idea arose to me, that it's not just the individual that's going towards the collective, but the collective going towards the individual. And of course, a while back, I had heard this quote from Kabir. Kabir, this yogi from India, enlightened sage, he says, many know that the drop merges into the ocean, but few know that the ocean merges into the drop. So I thought of a temporary being fascinated by the eternal, to in some sense be sorry guys, this music is so beautiful. Alright, let me begin here. Let's say you're someone who hears the concept of eternity and you're like, Mr.Within, what is eternity? And imagine me as a person, I'm like, how do I explain eternity? And I'm going to read for you how the dictionary defines it. As infinite or unending time. And who knew eternity was a noun? This whole time, so many people trying to be eternal, it's just a noun. So here are the different meanings of it in accordance to the dictionary. It says, so eternity, a state to which time has no application, timelessness, in theology, endless life after death. Used euphemistically to refer to death, he could have crashed the car and taken them both to eternity. An eternity, a period of time that seems very long, especially on account of being tedious or annoying. So you see, we are in time, wondering about outside of time. And let's say there's beings outside of time wondering about inside time. To say how many approaches so far in this lifetime I've read or have found towards the eternal, because everything that has shape and everything in the world that has shape in some sense changes. There is no fixed shape to things, So anything that has shape cannot pass the test of time, so anything in shape automatically is excluded from the concept of eternity. Now the concept of immortality is different, and of course I'm talking about the experience of eternity, because our experience is being classified as temporary. And let's say the pure temporary is that which is designed to experience the absence of its design. That means, isn't it incredible that we're human beings, that it took us 4.5 billion years to evolve to get to this point of history, language, society, civilization, but it's all temporarily being experienced. And after some point in the human life, it's as if we, just like how before somebody speaks, it's pure silence, and then words arise, from that silence. And after the person has done their speech or whatever, it's as if after the final word, it comes back to silence. And it could be that we could create a sort of relationship and say, if silence is the eternity for sound, as if sounds, in the same way that human beings temporarily, like let's say you say something and your voice is heard and the wave echoes, the sound wave echoes, depending on the room, but the wave just goes on, and eventually it has a sort of, I don't want to say friction, but it has a sort of resistance to the wave, and so the sound wave becomes less and less. It's kind of like a circle, and this kind of circle, I don't know how to tell you the exact geometry, the geometrical way of sound. I have a personal experience of it, but the way it's communicated, it's kind of like in the same way that inside an ocean, when a dolphin makes a sound, that sound kind of spherically from where it's being started off is being sent everywhere, right? So our mouths are in front of our face. They're on like they're our face points forward. What I'm trying to say, guys, is that when we create sound right now, as I'm creating sound from the front of my face, the sound kind of goes into the world. The sound after some time diminishes. The sound from a state of silence, there's sound arises, and then the sound returns back into the silence. Or you can say the whole human lifetime is like a dolphin jumping out of water, and then the whole lifetime it's outside of water. The moment it starts going back into the water, it is in some sense the lifetime is complete. So I'm saying, just like sound arises and it returns to the silence, the temporary arises and returns back into the void. And the void, strangely, is more eternal. That means, who knew? Emptiness is more eternal than the stuff inside emptiness. Because eventually, not eventually, but human beings, the way we try to make sense of the world around us is we put it into containers, right? And you can, for example, put food in a plastic container, and you put experiences of image into linguistic containers. So ideas are actually packaged images or film previews. Now, the temporary has to do with its containment, because our biological body is creating the opportunity for our individualism. The biological body is like a balloon. And so, aside from the human organism being a fragile creature, just not getting enough air, the person diminishes. So, it's as if our biological containment of our attention is where the concept of temporary is arising from. A couple years ago, I would say that, a couple years ago, I would say I was afraid of the concept of death. But I was not conceptually afraid, because we as people don't have the experience. Right now I'm alive, I haven't died. In my dreams, for example, I have died. Sometimes in my inner realms, sometimes when a person fails or gets embarrassed, an archetype dies to them, or the archetype that they have kept themselves in dies. And just a point about the title of this episode. Both the word, whenever or is used, it's kind of like an equal sign, you can say. So the eternally temporal and the temporarily eternal are actually the same moment. It's the same moment in existence. It's just two sides of the coin. One side, it's like we identify with the silence, imagine. One side we identify with words. And what's hilarious is that all of meditation is so that the person is still and silent, and so they don't identify with the words that move them, right? Imagine you're sitting on a chair and somebody comes and tells you, get off this chair. Now, it's as if like you're in a certain position and you have the choice to get off the chair, or you have the choice to stay on the chair, or you have the choice to grab the chair and start one of those old school movie bar fights, So what I'm trying to say is, like, first of all, human perception is a choice. Nobody, as much as you can say, let's say you're a person who you have never read anything, you have never seen any film, nothing. It's as if, and you have never even communicated your perception. The person still has perception. It's as if many people feel they don't have knowledge, but it's kind of impossible to live in a world and not know of its functions. I feel subconsciously everybody knows way more than they consciously can notice. I usually wear, since my childhood, my father, whenever he would go abroad, my life's been kind of between Iran and Canada, and my father would go to Iran when I was young, and he would come back to Canada, and whenever he would come back, he would bring one of these kind of Sufi rings, right? So I'm a person who I often just wear a ring, and the ring is it's cultural. It's not aesthetic. It's not for aesthetic reasons. It's for like significance of the symbol. But anyways, I'm a person who I wear rings sometimes, and so there was this one time where I had just taken off my ring and I had put it on a table, and I was talking to someone, and while I was talking to that person, automatically my hand grabs my ring, and I'm not even like aware. It's just such an automatic thing. And then I look to my left, and somebody was about to look at my ring, like pick it up and look at it. So it was as if our true intelligence is way more than our conscious behavior. It's as if the tip of the iceberg feels that's it, and then the tip of the iceberg is technically correct. In front of your eyes, you only see a biological body, But the tip of the iceberg, if it was to go within, if it was to wonder about its existence in the unknown, it would see a vast majority of its being is there, I can tell you there is no human being on this planet that can enter society without stories consuming them. You see, it's hilarious. It's as if people eat food and then stories eat people. And when I say stories eat people, it's a difference of how we consume information. And using the word consume is a bit strange here, but I will tell you why I'm using it. Because when a person eats food, the food becomes them, right? When a person eats a banana, they don't become a banana, right? It's like, or if you eat an apple, you don't become an apple, right? The apple becomes you. As if the apple has entered your universe and is abiding by the universe of your stomach's laws of digestion. So similarly, I would say it's the same that when I say language can devour a person, It's as if the person becomes the language rather than realizing the multidimensionality they experientially have access to. You know, the world kind of works like this, where you eventually get to a door, and you see people push the door and the door doesn't open, and you ask people, hey, why doesn't the door open? And the people say, nobody has been able to push this door, right? And after many years, imagine, you know, eventually someone came and everybody was pushing the door. This person decided to pull the door, you know. You see, everybody on the planet is trying to know truth. I think very few people consider that, what if it is the unknown? We know that if I was to kind of make a checklist, let me kind of attempt this. Let's say we have a checklist where we want to kind of see, okay, what are the qualities of a temporary being, the temporarily eternal, and what are the qualities of an eternal being, the eternally temporary. So I would say a temporary being has individualism, has worldhood, and experiences change. That means a temporary being can actually never, when I say that we have individualism, it's a changing world. So really who we are is actually a changing thing. It's as if how can you guess a person's potential when the person is growing in this life? You know, anything can happen. When I look at my youth and how there were certain things I was oblivious to, and then years later they suddenly activated in the context of my perception, I suddenly noticed them. It's as if there is no such thing as stupidity or being smart. There's just people who are aware where they are, and people who are not aware where they are. That means technically nervous people may look stupid, you know? Can you imagine if whenever somebody was nervous, they felt, you know? And you know, the biggest sign that you're a temporary being is because the person is seeking eternity. That means anybody right now seeking eternity, you as long as you seek it, you will be temporary. Because if a being was truly eternal, they would not doubt their eternity, right? That means right now, a person looks in the moment and they see their human body. They can see that they're being human, right? So if you were an eternal being, you wouldn't even question. It wouldn't even be the question. The question would be, is the temporary possible? So you can say that if the world is multidimensional, it's like neither temporary or eternal. It's as if a coin is neither heads or tails, you know. Either is both of them, or is neither heads or tails, you know. I think a coin is literally the most bizarre geometrical, you know, object, or the most bizarre objects, where it's as if each side of it has no clue of the other side. You know, imagine there was a universe, a sort of coin universe. And imagine right now we are on the temporary side of the coin, and imagine simultaneously there's an eternal side to the coin, and the eternal don't know that the temporary exists, and the temporary don't know the eternal exists. Imagine. I would say if a temporary being has access to individualism, a method of approach could be that an eternal being is collective. If the individual has a name, if the temporary being uses language, we can say the eternal state is a state beyond language. So it's languageless. We can say if the purpose of the temporary is to explore reality, you know, I would say the eternal, it's the opposite. For them, it's the what would a term be the opposite of exploration? I guess settlement. An eternal being doesn't really care for progress because it is eternal. That means its progress never ends. So another dimension of intelligence, most likely. Will be important. And imagine, guys, I mean here's the thing. Let's say immortality is conditional eternity, and eternity is unconditional immortality. What that means is an immortal being is literally an eternal shape. It is the witness of an eternal shape. But we can say an eternal being, an immortal, like right now, if a human being never died, we'd be kind of like this human shape, where the shape would most likely change, but consciousness would not leave. So I'm thinking, imagine in a universe where there's immortal beings, immortal individuals, and imagine a universe where there's collective eternals. Or eternal collectives. Yeah, eternal collectives. If an alien, let's say in the future, lands and we're like, yo alien, do you die? And the alien's like, no man, I can't die, I've transcended energy, bro. You know, imagine in the future if an alien cannot die, right? If it has shape, it would be immortal. If it is unconditional, that means if there is an extraterrestrial, this was like in Star Trek depicted this idea very beautifully, where it was as if there was a collective being that had surpassed shapehood, a sort of eternal consciousness in space, and this eternal consciousness could animate to the mind of every individual in accordance to their memory. That means imagine a human being with the human mind is like in like just for metaphor's sake, in like 2 dimensions. It's like a square, and imagine like higher beings are like a cube, like eternal beings, eternal and collectives. Let's say the collective eternals. Let's say they are like a cube. The temporary individual is like a square, so the cube not only knows the temporary, but it knows 5 other dimensions of the temporary plane. If in that cubic metaphor, right? So a cube would be like, buddy, there's 5 other worlds I'm taking care of you alongside yours, right? And what it would mean, it would actually be 3 dualistic worlds, you know, or 6 separate dimensions for the cubic metaphor. That means if I take geometry seriously, I would have this approach where I would say higher dimensional beings not only can see through our body, but they can also see through everything. They can know our mind before we even move, right? Because think about it, if intelligence is space, is in the space, or is the space, then whatever's in the space's death is a return to its intelligence, to that intelligence. And so, what are the options of humanity, right? What are the options of the human being? Either we become an immortal pattern, that means till the end of time, just human beings are having pretty much sex till the end of time. And we're overpopulating the whole universal sector, and imagine interstellar initiatives have been taken forth already. And so I would say in 3,600 years, either we just have pretty much sex till the end of time, or or what we can do is transcend humanism, transcend objecthood and subjecthood completely. Right now it's kind of impossible. Right now it's like the only way I can at least step out of the subjecthood is if my objective being kind of completes. Right? It's as if it's like two dimensions and they're running towards a finish line at different speeds. Okay? If the person's mind doesn't, the simulation of their mind doesn't complete before their body reaches the finish line, technically incarnation is the only possibility. Reincarnation is the only possibility from a, I would say, Vedic theological standpoint. Because the person's mind has not completed. That means it's as if, imagine we have the body of a human. We have the body of a human, and now imagine we have the mind of a human. Okay? Now the body of a human is there. If the mind of the human doesn't complete its let's say a whole lifetime's humanization process, it's as if the mind has to step out of the body before the body steps out of the world. If this happens, a consciousness of a superior energetic state is retained. If this doesn't happen, technically the mind's like, I'm not done yet, but the body's leaving, right? The body, imagine at the moment of physical transition from this realm, from this plane of existence. So what are the piloting options, right? Either the mind has to detach in the bardo state, as Tibetan Buddhism says. What that means is, let's say a person has a lot of suffering and they die before they find a solution to this suffering. And let's for a second consider René Descartes was correct, and so there is a sort of mind-body dualism going on, where my personality may be still around in let's say the bardo, but my physical body, let's say at the point of my transition out of this realm, may not be here. You know? And the strange thing about life is, guys, this is the biggest reason why human beings should be nice to their moment of being, not just what they select in their moment, is because at any moment we can literally be teleported out of here. You know, in the Islamic world, there's a saying which is very interesting, which they say, any moment God can take your breath away. What that means is, in some sense, we are here not based on only our choice, but the choice of nature as well, you know. We can say that, for example, Tibetan Buddhist monks, when a human being dies, what they do is they cremate. That means burn with fire, completely physical existence, so there's no physical object left behind. So even if there's a soul staring at its body after its death, like there is no body, there's nobody anymore, you know. But of course, what I'm saying is that the attention, there's a reason. So the attention isn't on the body. And for 40 days, I think it's 40 days, the Tibetan monks, for 40 days, they just keep chanting prayers. And these prayers are guidance for the soul in the bardo state. That means people don't know how complex Tibetan Buddhism is. They look at the Dalai Lama and they're like, what a lovely person. Is that it? No. There is so much more complexity, and of course there is something where it's even understanding the concept behind the Dalai Lama is very crucial. Many people don't know this, but evidently something is tragic is happening to the Tibetan Buddhist tradition and to the Tibetan Buddhist mythos. And I would say it's that evidently where the Dalai Lama would reincarnate has become a part of like another country. China, and so the Dalai Lama evidently can't reincarnate, or they can't find the reincarnation of the next Dalai Lama or something. There seems to be something like that. Just some tangent news, you know. But the idea is that the human being eventually goes into the bardo in Tibetan Buddhist thought, and there's a book written by Guru Padmasambhava. This book is a very, like, if I tell you the story of how this book came about, you'd be fascinated. There's a book called the Tibetan Book of the Dead. So there was this person named Guru Padmasambhava, very enlightened being, lives an incredible bodhisattvic life. At the end of at some point in his bodhisattvic life, he writes a book and hides the book. He writes a book and hides the book. What do you call it? Under some stone or something. And years later, a human being is born that randomly goes to that exact spot, knows where to look and finds the book, and it's like that. It's the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which in Buddhism they look at. And so it's as if it's an avalanche of the life that we have held on to. You know what it is? It's literally, I would say, a sort of eviction. If the being doesn't establish a conscious relationship with the unknown before they actually physically and non-physically enter it, it's as if like then they will seek the knowledge, right? They will seek the known. You know, this world is fascinating when you look at all the different psychologies that existed on it. You know, in modern times, nobody wants to die. I mean, in all time, nobody ever wanted to die. But there were some people, for example, the samurai had a very next level approach to death, for example. You know, what do you call it? The yogis didn't feel even death was possible. They felt that if your mind still fathomed death, it had not understood its presence. You know, that means it's as if during this life, there can be a unique experience known as nirvana moksha. And this unique experience renders the intelligence unconditional to itself. This is why love it's in literally all wisdom traditions, you know. Evidently, if you didn't love enlightenment, you couldn't get enlightened. You know, sometimes I do wonder, you know. Trust me, there's many moments in these talks I give where I am suddenly pushed into wondering about something I say in the inner realms. And it's so strange because it's just like we have two eyes that are being the same moment. We have a subjective mind and an objective body that are being one person. And the subjective realm is unconditional. You know, that means a person can close their eyes and they can literally be a Jedi. You can visualize, like right now in front of me, I see my laptop. I could be like, I could command the laptop, be like, laptop, jump in the air, you know, and nothing may happen. But in my inner realms, I could poetically animate. That means in our imagination, the laws of physics don't work, because that's the biggest clue that our imagination is being self-created, you know, to some degree. And I do speak about the human being an antenna, but that's a completely different, not completely different, but that would kind of change the context of this episode. I would say, let's say that if one side of a coin wanted to make contact, let's say one side of a coinish universe, one side of a coinish universe, there's a temporary, again, this metaphor that one side of the universe is double-edged, double-sided, one side temporary, one side eternal. Now, the eternal can't see the temporary, and the temporary can't see the eternal. But when the temporary stops being temporary to itself and realizes there is another side to the universe, then it can access the eternal. Because for us, it's conceptual. Our direct experience as human beings, like sometimes I can't tell what death is, because every moment in life, the cells are changing. Everything is changing in every moment. That means it's as if are we calling change life and death? You know? Or is life and death just one concept, change? It's not two concepts, you know? We have Plato sharing this incredible quote, as if somebody asked him, what's the time, Plato, you know? And he's like, time is the moving image of eternity, and because he didn't know what the time was. So really, that's what it is, you know? If energy is an eternal concept that can't be created or destroyed but changes all the time, it's literally like the soul is an energy that from one side is unconditional freedom, and from another side is conditional enslavement. This is why they're like, even if you try to free samsara, it's designed that way. That means, let's say, you know, human beings are like, you know, let's say the pilots in the future, they're like, all right, you know, Mr. Within talked about an advanced civilization, let's see if it's possible, you know, and so let's say the species tries to build this advanced civilization long after I'm gone, and I'm thinking like, wait a minute, what if karmically it's not authorized? You know, in my youth, I experienced a karmic quarantine. That means it had an inner realm quarantine that it was like, I would say it had nothing to do with my outer realms. Mainly it had to do with my own eyes. But when I say a karmic quarantine, that means nothing to do with it. I mean, I don't know, since my childhood, I could see my whole moment of being. What I mean is like, there is a way that people move, which that creates a movement to the moment, gives a movement to the moment, and there's a way the moment moves that has nothing to do with the person moving. When I say karmic quarantine, it has to do with how the moment moves, regardless of my opinion or other people's opinion, you know? You see, we have the concept of the visible others. That means we open our eyes and see other creatures, other entities, you know? So many people are afraid of the, you know, spirits. They're like, oh my God, what do I do if I see a spirit? You know, it's like every day we walk outside, we're seeing spirits everywhere. You know, it's as if every person, if a person believes in ghosts because they believe in the concept of the soul, then it's like, it's as if like, you know, it doesn't matter if it's embodied or not. The one's presence remains not in accordance to the personality of their lifetime, but the intelligence that was moving the personality before the individual was born. So it's kind of like we're a surfer, and we lost our surfboard, and suddenly we found the surfboard again, you know? And so this lifetime is literally just the human being balancing itself on a surfboard until it passes through a sort of wave of experiential acknowledgement. And this is why experiences are more important than ideas, because if you see an experience that surpasses this dimension, most likely you're not coming back here. In accordance to like a Vedic context of thought. We we say that a eternal being has a temporary being has a personality. Now, could an eternal moment of being have a personality? The concept of God depicted this. But I think it was Aristotle where he said if like lions became conscious like humans, their prophets and their God would be seen in the image of a lion. You know? That means it's said that man is made in the image of God, but incredibly, due to cultural reasons, God is made in the also God what the couple pound brain can fathom. That is in some sense God made in the image of us. Do you see? So it's as if that's the difference between the theist and atheist, believe it or not. They're fighting over truth's reflection. You know, I feel like a candle sometimes, guys. A candle where time is like the wax melting. Consciousness is the glow of the candle flame. The biological body is the wax. The brain is and the nervous system is in some sense what do you call it? The wick of the candle. The unknown universe is the dark room the candle is found in. Knowledge is how far the glow of this candle illuminates the dark room. As a candle, all you can do is share the light. There is nothing else, nothing smarter the candle can do. The human lifetime, it's like we're like a burst of energy into the realm, and then this energy diminishes. It's as if the friction of living. There's a friction to living, aside from the biological being, in some sense, becoming old. Time is merciless. Time, I would say, time doesn't care about a person's emotions. Time doesn't even care about matter. So, I'm going to pilot into a quote tunnel on the concept of eternity. So guys, I'm going to, for the first time, attempt to read some eternal quotes. So, Francis Bacon, begin doing what you want to do now. We're not living in eternity. We have only this moment, sparkling like a star in our hand and melting like a snowflake. Helen Hunt Jackson, when time is spent, eternity begins. Wow, wow. One of the best quotes. This quote deserves to go into the future great museum of sentences, you know. Great museum of language, you know. Guys, I've predicted that there will be a museum of language. Like, if I had the resources, I would start it tomorrow, you know. Edwin Hubble Chapin says, every action of our lives touches on some chord that will vibrate in eternity. It's as if the whole jungle will hear the lion's roar, you know, and the whole cosmos will hear humanity's advanced civilization. Henry Van Dyke says, time is too slow for those who wait, too swift for those who fear, too long for those who grieve, too short for those who rejoice. But for those who love, time is eternity. That means love is an incredible strategy to actually not suffer in time. You know, they say lovers are timeless. I think it's philosophically true. Isaac, I can't pronounce this. Isaac Bashevis, nature creates has eternity in it. Saint Augustine, eternity is the now that does not pass away. Bridget Bardot says, a photograph can be an instant of life, captured for eternity, that will never cease looking back at you. Abraham Kuyper says, there are two kinds of beauty. There is a beauty which God gives at birth and which withers as a flower. And there is a beauty which God grants when by His grace men are born again. That kind of beauty never vanishes but blooms eternally. To just share this with a secular audience, like what I think this Abraham Kuyper is trying to say. You see, when he says there's a beauty which God gives at birth, this means our natural biological position, right? That's the candle wax, right? Like, it's like everybody's getting older, you know? And age is actually a way where we try to ignore time, you know? Time's true nature. Then Abraham Kuyper says, and there's a beauty which God grants when by His grace men are born again. This is the inner beauty. The inner beauty of a person is so fascinating because in the outer realms, sure, people are different. Magazines are popularizing certain biological DNAs, you know, you know, and that's totally fine. You know, it's just the way society has moved. But the inner beauty has to do with your attitude. This took me a while to figure out, guys. You know, it took me. When I figured it out, I realized why inner peace is important. Inner peace is just part of, it's kind of like when you realize the soul, which is being the whole moment in existence, is beautiful. It's as if the person is born in a beautiful existence, in a beautiful universe. You see? It's as if the nature is at peace, right? I've never seen, you know, any other species on this planet attempt to build nuclear weapons. You know? Nature is at peace in whatever it is. You know, you don't see squirrels trying to like update their methods, you know. They live in accordance to their nature, right? So we even though our past was savage, animals fought and stuff, you know, viciously, but there has always been a moment where anytime there was no predator or prey, the animal was cultivating peace, a sort of peace with the world, you know. I think it was Khalil Gibran where he said, let me find this quote. He has this next level quote. I gotta read this for people. This quote is, check this out. Khalil Gibran says, out of suffering have emerged the strongest souls. The most massive characters are seared with scars. And these scars, your scars for your inner realms, you know, is in some sense the memories that have shaped you as they have happened, you know. Let's say you're a person and you're walking on a snowy day, you know, and so let's say you're young and you're in front of someone you like and you suddenly slip on the snow. That becomes a registered memory in the conscious framework of the entity moving in time. So that memory will shape the person's character. Do you know? That means it's as if, why does this person, instead of blushing, look at the ground every time? As if the memory of falling on the snow has registered. You know, it has left an imprint. It's as if the world is sculpting man and man is sculpting the world, and there's a symbiosis of the temporary with the eternal, you know. The world will be here, but man will leave. You know, I get emotional every time I say this quote, but there's this incredible quote. I don't know where in the world it originated from, but from some wise culture and tradition. And the quote says that when man is born, when the child is born, the child cries and the world laughs, the world celebrates this child's emergence into the world. And then when the man is dying, that means it's like when the man dies. That means when the human being has lived their life and, you know, when the oceans underneath our eyes have dried up, you know, the second part of the quote says, when the man dies, the world cries. You know, that means it's as if and man laughs. That means the human being that is transcending this dimension. Do you know, it's like, it's not just saying goodbye to friends and family. It's saying goodbye to how the world was in your consciousness. There's a world here now, and it's so much more unknown than known that whatever human beings say about it can never be true. Why? Because all that the small can do, all that the small can do is remember, you know, that it's big. That's it. The wave returns into the ocean. You know, what greater truth do we need? You know, it's like it's like all of life is here, so we can see it. And after we see it, the response to sight is life. You know, life is like, there has to be a world to be able to be engaged. Helen Hayes says, love is perhaps the only glimpse we are permitted of eternity. Marcus Aurelius, what we do in life ripples in eternity. Helen Keller, it gives me a deep, comforting sense that things, with a capital T, seen are temporal, and things unseen are eternal. You see, it's as if we feel that the audience is only temporary. But there could be theoretically advanced civilizations, at least in my school of thought, that they have surpassed the language threshold. That means they have mastered they have gone faster than the speed of light. As if, imagine there was a advanced civilization on Earth. It found the technology to go faster than the speed of light, and we could never see it, but it could always see us. And imagine one day we realize light beams of the sun are conscious, and the consciousness that is imbued in matter is actually inputted by the sun. Can you imagine we realize the sun is alive? Like, that would be one of those moments where we'd be like, no way, no way, no way. There are moments in life where a human being can't do anything. And what's hilarious is that the moment the person accepts that what is being is the truth, it's as if the mind stops. Sri Ramana Maharshi, this yogi, he says, ask yourself, who am I? Like, that's a very huge thing about his philosophy. Let me find this quote he has. Sri Ramana Maharshi says, you have to ask yourself the question, who am I? This investigation will lead in the end to the discovery of something within you, which is behind the mind. Solve that great problem, and you will solve all other problems. For Mr.Within would say, the winds of evolution have already arrived. It's like the intelligence needed to advance is here. It's just the decision. It's as if, honestly, when I give these talks, I feel like, sometimes, and this is my ignorance, of course, speaking, I guess, but sometimes I feel like an orchestra conductor, when I give these talks, as if I'm just moving like the stick, and every person who in some sense has an instrument, it's as if they, what it is, it's as if an advanced civilization is when the orchestra begins to, in some sense, play its great melody, as if the songs of an advanced civilization, it would be literally, it would be like beautiful music. Imagine you were walking in a dull city and you suddenly heard beautiful music. You chased the beautiful music, and little did you know you were taking leaps in time as you pursued beauty. And so you eventually got to a point where you saw the music was coming from the future, and everybody knows the greatest musicians haven't been born yet. Hey everyone, my attention came to the chat section, so let's go through it. Angela Buckley says, time is an illusion, it does not exist. It is only the time to think of those that you miss. True. Keanu Reeves, this actor who strangely plays just pretty much he's killing everyone in his movies. But in real life, he's a very kind person. And Keanu Reeves, I think he was on one of these talk shows, and somebody asks him, what do you think is going to happen after this life, right? After you die. And he says, I know that the ones who love us will continue to love us, And the audience is just like, oh, But it's very profound, that we have this life to actually see what life is. It's literally as if you're given 100 years to explore what temporality means, and to figure out what's going on here. I mean, that is the greatest thing. For me, at least my fascination with information, not only because we're in an information age, but my fascination with information is that it is literally the dirt that has to be brushed aside from a hidden artifact, in the unknown. right? So I feel that there's incredible genius angles to doing anything, but they're not accessed. That means imagine you're a person who's doing something in the world in a certain way, and you suddenly in that moment are like, wait a minute, what if there's people on the planet, and you imagine and you see maybe there's somebody on the planet doing whatever you're doing, exactly same scenario, but handling it so much better, you know? Approaching the moment in a way better way than you're approaching it. So that means if the moment it's kind of like a person makes a mistake, then realizes what they could have done, you know. And I'm saying before a person makes a mistake, the world is like probabilities everywhere, right? And it's the choice of an inner realm, you know. That means our minds are changing faster than our bodies, and because they're changing faster than our bodies, we can choose which inner realm context to have before we conceptualize physically as an individual. That means before we communicate or speak, we're choosing how we're approaching what we're seeing, you know. But anyways, Esmeralda in the chat section says, years ago I went to a Buddhist temple in Dumfries and I got the Tibetan Book of the Dead. When my granddad passed away, I took the book to the care home and read verses from the book to guide him. Wow. Yeah. So Tibetan Buddhists would be proud of you as well. Jeff Hoskins says, what's your thoughts on the spirit speaking within us through others, ourselves, and the world? Yeah. So the thing is, I have my own experience of it, which is for my personal, which is in my own inner realm. And then there's ways I know that in history, people have approached it. In ancient Greece, it was the idea of the logos, you know. In religious traditions, it's the will of God. Or in Christianity, it's the Holy Spirit, you know. To Friedrich Nietzsche, for example, the logos animated to him as a demon, you know. To, I believe it was Descartes, it animated not as a demon, but as a daemon. Sorry, not to Descartes, to Plato. I think it was Plato. Yeah, to Socrates, he called it the inner oracle, right? That means there has been different names, individual DNAs, individual human beings have given it to have a relationship with the potential unknown intelligence, you know. But the idea is that when you trust your world, you actually become selfless. That means, believe it or not, the less you trust the world, the more egotistical you will be. The more you trust the moment, the less you need to have an idea, because the direct experience is moving the moment, right? And I would say, like, before one even thinks of the spirit speaking within us, we have to be like, okay, let's say the spirit is speaking within us, but why is the spirit speaking to us, and where is the spirit speaking, right? And the spirit is speaking in the human civilization, right? So what that means is, it's like, I would say most people's relationship with the logos is, of course, collective selfless service. This is literally a path in many religions, right? People are like, you know, some people see religion as if I don't want to be a slave to a concept, you know, and then there's some people who see religion and they see, no, it's a transformation of the individual through some format. That means it doesn't matter how the portal is designed. You know, once you get through it, you're not in the same world. And what it means is that it's an experiential adjustment. That I'll say it like this. First of all, you gotta be you gotta honor your own your simplest self's decency. First of all, that's important. Anybody who cannot be simple, just realize life is just existing simple. You cannot. How can I tell you? You cannot. If you cannot accept the simplest version of yourself, the universe will not reveal to you complex. It's more complex intelligence. Do you know? There's a strategy to metaphysics, ladies and gentlemen, that is like, oh my God, another dimension, let's go. Then there's a strategy to metaphysics where the person's like, okay. before I go on seeking other worlds, first of all, what world am I in? Where am I? And when you start from the center, as if you want to know where you are first, right? That means you study the known self and the known world, okay? And this is what the educational system is here for, right? Because anything that goes beyond language, we need an experiential approach, and the experiential approach is suggested to be in solitude, so nobody can teach you truth. You can be it though. You can be true. So, oh man, where was I going with this? Yeah. So the logos. You can animate it, you can have a relationship. Back in the day in ancient Greece, warriors in battle were probably like, Zeus, give me strength, or Hercules, have my back in the battlefield, okay? And they would run into battle, So there was, people have had always a relation. Think of it this way. Think of it, the intelligence that we are right now, that is asking the question, has 4 angles to look at things. Okay, has access to 4 modes of perception. All right, that means don't think about just communicating, just having the collective spirit expressed through you. Just forget all of that and just think of it this way. What are the possibilities? In life, we are, as first of all, a self in a world. It all starts like that. You are an individual and you're in a giant unknown place. Okay, so self and world is where it's all human psychology is starting from. Okay, now what are the options? Okay, so there is, you can say, the options are, you have a known self, okay, and then they're inside a known world. You have a known self inside an unknown world. You have an unknown self inside you have an unknown self inside a known world. There we go. And then you have an unknown self in an unknown world. These are the 4 modes. Imagine there's four unique states of mind, right? Right now, I am speaking to you as a conscious, as a known self in a known world, because I have no choice. I got to speak about what is observable, like what we can see. That means it's like, even if I have the most advanced inner experiences to want to share with people, it's limited to my sight and that. So think of these as dimensions that a person needs to cultivate mastery in, called like train themselves, right? So you get to know your known self, then you get to know your known world. In order to get to know your known world, you need to study science. In order to get to know your known self, you just need to look in a mirror. Now we have the unknown self and the unknown world. And when somebody says, for example, Jeff, when you say, what are your thoughts on the spirits speaking within us through others? That's a relationship of an unknown world with an unknown self, and then that unknown self with the known self in a known world. Do you see? So I would say your relationship with that spirit exists until, as long as you're separate. You have the moment you realize the one that we are praying to is the one that is praying. As Meister Eckhart says, the same eyes I see God are the same eyes God sees me. The language for spirituality evaporates like snow in the direct experience of the sun. Like legit. That means there are states of being that are dehumanized, right? I personally dabbled in these states, right? But when I say dabbled, it was just out of my curiosity, because I had experienced the known self and I had experienced the known world, and I'm like, been there, done that, what else is here? And then automatically the dimensions that were my unknown self had to do with my memory. The dimensions that had to do with the unknown world had to do with how far we've explored the world so far. So it's your relationship, Jeff. The relationship you want to have with the unknown collective intelligence of the collective unconscious. For me, I have my personal archetypes. Like that means it's first of all, to me, truth is not in language. So I would say, even if people were like Mr. Within, is a interdimensional force assisting you, I will be like, it has no personality. I would tell you at most, it's as if there's some people who they want to see other intelligent formats of life in the unknown, and there's some people who are not interested in wanting to see a face or having God shake their hand. You know what I mean? Like but a very fascinating question, Jeff. Yeah, so Jeff, I just read the rest of your comment in the chat section. I would just tell you, if you have reached that point where you are a presence, you're your whole moment of being rather than just identifying with fragmented moments inside it, then I would say there is no more question. That's the whole point. That means if there's any absence of confidence, is because the experiential knowing is not there. That's the only way I can speak about things that have to some degree in my experience been the revelation of just the world to my eyes. And everybody is like this. We have a complex brain that in some sense holds moments after they're gone. And if the mind is not an object, who says that the moment cannot hold on to itself? Like maybe the body diminishes, but the personality is like, no way, I'm still around, after death, imagine. Right? So it means the ultimate renunciation, excuse me, is to see beyond the way the past has contained the world. If we say knowledge is truth, knowledge, they say, is power. Nobody says knowledge is truth. Knowledge can be power, right? A person who has more information has more control over the landscape. Generals back in the day in warfare, what would they do? The general, they would say, the general that aligns to heaven wins. That heaven favors, that general wins, right? And what does that mean? The general that heaven favors is the general that has seen more of the battlefield, has seen further stages. There was this show where there was this samurai in the show, and this samurai would intentionally go to a great swordsman, master swordsman, and he would intentionally lose to them. And people were like, this man is a loser, but why does he do this? And he would go fight with them, and he had such a complex inner realms that the moment he fought with other master swordsmen once, he would go back into the forest in pure isolation and just visualize the whole skill. That means he would, in some sense, in his mind, battle that master like 100 times before fighting. Let me see if there's more of the eternal code tunnel. Yeah. Maynard James Keenan says, a circle is the reflection of eternity. It has no beginning and it has no end. And if you put several circles over each other, then you get a spiral. Plus additional dimensions. That means a spiral can be a circle in 2 dimensions, but in 3 dimensions it's not a circle. And honestly, direct experience is like a spiral, and ideology, indirect ideology, is like a circle. You know, few people realize that communication is all about image sharing. You know? One more quote, and I'll go back into the talk. Mother Teresa says, "Death is nothing else but going home to God. The bond of love will be unbroken for all eternity." I'll read a few more quotes. Michael N. says, "Calendars and clocks exist to measure time, but that signifies little because we all know that an hour can seem as eternity or pass in a flash according to how we spend it." Henry David Thoreau says, "You must live in the present, launch yourself on every wave, find your eternity in each moment." William Shakespeare says, "Thou knowest 'tis common, all that lives must die, passing through nature to eternity." You see, I think that's a more advanced approach, you know? That because we've experienced the temporary, only the eternity is left to experience. But of course, we should not hide under any idea. You know, it's as if we're ants that should get offended if we're hiding under rocks. Under language, you know. Khalil Gibran says, "Trust in dreams, for in them is hidden the gate to eternity." Shri Nisargadatta Maharaj says, "Just as every drop of the ocean carries the taste of the ocean, so does every moment carry the taste of eternity." C.S. Lewis says, "All that is not eternal is eternally out of date." Robert Greene Ingersoll, "In the presence of eternity, the mountains are as transient as the clouds." Wow, this quote is incredible. Wow. In the presence of eternity, the mountains are as transient as the clouds. Wow. That what he means is just like how clouds fade over time, the mountains break after eons, you know. William Blake says, "Live in eternity's sunrise. Live in eternity's sunrise." That means the eternal is it's literally a realm without endings. So that means all this human psychology that comes because we're temporary, it's like, imagine all of this being absent, right? So to become familiar with our with the presence, with our universal presence before the idea of man fades, is to live. And I will tell you, sometimes I feel like a bird on a branch, and sometimes I feel like a bird in the sky, you know. A bird in the sky that is not here, you know. Sometimes I feel my mind has never been on earth, but the body could never be anywhere else. Susan L. Taylor says, we don't have an eternity to realize our dreams, only the time we are here. Terence McKenna, there is no dualism in the world of light. The conventions of relativity say that time slows down as one approaches the speed of light. But if one tries to imagine the point of view of a thing made of light, one must realize that what is never mentioned is that if one moves at the speed of light, there is no time whatsoever. One exists in eternity. One has become eternal. One is then apart from the moving image. One exists in the completion of eternity, right? So it's an incredible thing Terence McKenna is saying, because he's saying, imagine everything is moving at the speed of light, you know? Even we need light to even measure the speed of vehicles, you know? So if we were going at the speed of light, there would be no time. If there would be no time, there would be no self. If there is no self, the eternal is faster than the speed of light. It is the world that you will find, you know. You know what's hilarious? That means life is slow, and from a slow known speed, we go into an unconscious fast, fast and fury. You know, a furious fastness, you know. The last sentence, he says, one exists in the completion of eternity. Yeah, because if we're saying we're temporary, the temporarily eternal, if we look at it from that way, or we have been looking at it that way from the beginning of our life, we could be like, yo man, I'm eternally temporal from the other side of the coin. I'm eternity experiencing temporality for a little while, or I'm the temporary experiencing the potential of eternity for a little while. You know? And of course, the concept of eternity, unlike immortality, is unconditional. So what that means is, like, there doesn't need to be a self for there to be eternity. Eternity is eternal regardless of if there were human beings or not. You know, that means the universe's eyes are open even if man's eyes close. But I feel the universe has cared for man's vision, you know, because intelligence has remained. You know, that means when I look at our human history, I'm like, how did we make it? Seriously, how did we make it? You know, it's like when a person thinks about the earliest human beings, and you're like, how did they give birth when they had no clue what it was? You know? And so the only explanation is that it was an unconscious act of nature. Nature's intelligence was nature preserved the human process. And what that means is nature has work for us. You know, that means for the first time, every human being should be employed by their planet to serve. You know, I feel people who wear uniforms of all kinds, they are people who serve. They want to serve the realm, you know. And imagine if 8 billion human beings were just like, okay, let's see how many win-win scenarios we can create in a changing world where not only resources like ocean waves change, but at the same time, it's like we have to care for our species, because that's the only thing keeping us human, you know. And a lot of people who hate the world, they dehumanize, and they even may allow themselves to hurt themselves. You know, it's very complex. You know, it's when I look at suffering, I'll be like, okay, there's an outer realm suffering, which is just how Buddha was saying when he stepped out of the kingdom. He saw old age, he saw disease, you know, he saw pain, and he saw death, and he's like, holy shit, human beings have to go through this. What do we do? What do we do? What do we do? And then he got enlightened. William Blake says, to see a world in a grain of sand and a heaven in a wildflower. And Clayton Christensen says, I have been blessed to see visions of eternity, and events in my future that have been important for me to foresee have been revealed to me. Okay, so we have Clayton Christensen, evidently is imagine a time traveler came back and you're like, hey man, can I get to see the future a little bit? And the time traveler is like, all right. You know, but I'll tell you, the future is the mind. That means anybody who has seen the future, they have understood that the future is not individual, truly. That means if a time traveler comes back from the future and says, yo, in the future it's in a post-apocalyptic scenario, we'll be like, yo man, you shouldn't have come back, you should have gone forward. Because the further you go into the future, it's literally like the world is trying to create something and every human being is a part of it. It's strange. It may be the case that after the advanced communicators have ushered in the advanced civilization, once we attain the most advanced state of civilization, pretty much the civilization getting closer to changing at the speed of light, the moment civilization updates itself beyond the speed of light, it has moved beyond the language threshold, because everything that we can put words to is in our sight, and sight is light. That means call it the light of the gods, call it the light of the sun. It's just that light is in your eyes. That's the thing. William Penn says, for death is no more than a turning of us over from time to eternity. Tom Stoppard says, eternity is a terrible thought. I mean, where's it all going to end? That's the thing. Because the body experiences friction, we feel the mind has to abide by the body. But I will tell you, the mind is a commanding officer. And the soul, which is the whole moment, is the general. And those who listen to the general, you follow direct orders. And what I mean by this is not that the person has an inner realm narrative that is influencing how they should be in the outer realms. I'm just saying that when it comes to intelligence, there's levels to it, and there's different freedoms granted in these levels. Right now, I have a freedom to raise my hand in the air, which I'm doing. Now, in my mind, I have a freedom to fly in the sky. I could visualize myself flying, and even visualize how from my first person point of view would be if I was like 100 meters in the air. I could visualize that, right? But it doesn't mean I can be there, So in our mind, the version of ourself that flies is actually not us, because there is an additional observer of any content. That means it's like, whether this is how I'm saying we're more than objects and subjects, because we can notice them, we can notice their individualism. That means, what will human beings do when they realize there's the echo of their own sounds in the void is their ideological truth? Beyond that, it's experiential. And so it's as if, do we care for how the human being looks like, or do we care for what the human being is doing? And it's as if, like, a person can avoid the responsibility of their individualism by feeling they're God all the time. That happens, right? But I will tell you, the moment you function in a non-dual consciousness, you will experience it. I don't want to say this is a bad thing, but you experience a sort of backlash of the outer realm karma. So that means, if right now I don't choose to be an individual, right? The karma is that I can't say anything, because who is there to say? Right? So the idea of the individual is it's like a privilege of our dimension, Anyways, Alfred Russel Wallace says, in my solitude I have pondered much on the incomprehensible subjects of space, eternity, life, and death. Marianne Williamson says, God exists in eternity. The only point where eternity meets time is in the present. The present is the only time there is. Seneca the Younger says, the day which we fear as our last is but the birthday of eternity. Caterpillars will 100% agree with that. Joseph Barber Lightfoot says, we do not realize that we are children of eternity. If we did, then success would be no success, and failure would be no failure to us. Boris Becker says, so this is it, match point for eternity. Rainer Maria Rilke says, pronounce my last name correctly now. She says, be out of sync with your times for just one day, and you will see how much eternity you can contain within you. That means, guys, I've literally read too many quotes of people saying, it's like beyond eternity, beyond time is literally the eternal. I mean, what else can it be? Even emptiness is acting eternity. Can you imagine being like, one of those Italian archetypes in movies, those Italian characters, it's like, I don't know if I could do a proper impression. It's like the person looking at emptiness, let's say an Italian kind of ex-mafia philosopher. Imagine a fictional character like that, and this fictional character looks at the universe, the void, and it's like, where do you get the balls to be eternal? So you see, emptiness, like it's the only thing about eternity that maybe draws the individual mind is its image, right? That means if there wasn't a promise of an afterlife where you could have anything you want, it's as if it's like the human psyche, because it's the small and the big, is working on promises, like how many promises are there, right? Religions are making promises, people are making promises, history is making promises, the future is trying to hold on to its promises, And people on earth think about going to heaven, but very few people, and I think very few theologians, I don't know, maybe theologians are thinking about this, but like, I would say not enough theologians are thinking about where earth is made. That means it's as if we have this notion that God made the earth and the heavens, and in the heavens he banished the angel and man from heaven due to their misconduct, due to the first initial sin, which was the sin of knowledge. It's as if earth is made in heaven. That means if you see earth, you are as a theologian, as a religious person, I mean, how else would a person conceptualize? As if, where did God make earth? As if there is a heaven that is holding God in a landscape where a man can fall from a heaven to earth, as if there's a heaven that is holding heaven and earth, So it's either all heaven, as if earth is a simulation in heaven. How hilarious would that be, Or heaven is a simulation on earth, the secular cyber spaces, cyberspace, man. I don't know how to term it, to a cyber, let's say to a cyberspace theologian, heaven is a simulation on earth, when a person is happy, it's as if their mind has found peace with the moment. That is one of the greatest achievements of the inner realms, you stop the war of the past with the future. And only through an acknowledgement of the present can you do this. This is why Kabir says, they ask him how long does it take to get enlightened. He says half of an instant. And at the same time, there's a story of Kabir where Kabir shouts at one of his disciples. He was very intense, enlightened character in history, and Kabir shouts at one of his disciples and he says, "Disciple, tell me, what is God?" And the disciple instantly says, "The breath inside the breath." As if eternity is watching a temporary film, or a temporary actor is in an eternally unknown world. And guys, I gotta relocate for a second. Okay, guys, I'm back. Uh, so Percy, I'll just continue with the quote on a little bit more. Percy Bysshe Shelley says it is easier to suppose that the universe has existed for all eternity than to conceive a being beyond its limits capable of creating it. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe says death is a commingling of eternity with time. In the death of a good man, eternity is seen looking through time. Wow. Guys, these quotes I share in the chat section. Feel free to share this in your social media, wherever you are. Guys, Jeff in the chat section says something incredible. Jeff says, do you all feel the world changing in your souls? I feel it. Yeah, that's why I'm saying we're antennas. The moment you notice the antenna, you notice that it's as if energy has access to a dimension where it's being, regardless of whatever is happening, and then there's a transformative outer surface to change. Harlecana says in the chat section, shares a quote by Henry David Thoreau: how can we kill time without injuring eternity? Yeah, you can't kill time. Time kills you usually. But the idea is that you wander beyond time, right, guys? There's ways that a moment can be conducted where the person literally, like, imagine there's a puddle and you have an option of stepping into the puddle and crossing, and there's an option of like jumping over the puddle, right? So, and it depends on the person's choice of how they want to conduct their attention. You know, it's kind of like you gotta find contentment with the simplest dimensions of the system, then you activate, then you can very easily step into complex states and understand them. That means, think of it this way. Think of the human mind starting from simple dimensions like the child's mind, and as it grows up, the dimensions become complex, as if layers and layers of information, you know, pile up like a Tetris game. Right? So the child has the experience like of an empty cup, and then as it grows up, the cup is getting filled with water, you know? And when the cup gets filled to the brim, it overflows, right? Once a person is content with the simple, that means even if they fail, they will come back to the familiar. You know? That means if somebody says, like, let's say a strange nihilist arose, you know, one day, and this nihilist went among other nihilists and was like, guys, I am emptiness, so there is no emptiness. And imagine emptiness was the ultimate home. It's as if where every phenomena has went to rest after its expressionism. You know, the great abode beyond content. Guys, there's great questions in the chat section. Keep them coming. But keep in mind, the whole context of this episode is I'm trying to wonder about how life would be seen through the eyes of a temporary being, and then how eyes would potentially be seen by an eternal witness, an attributeless eternal witness. You know, for me, they say God is like this, like in a religious context. I'll give you, like in my childhood, I went to a religious person, and I asked them, what is the soul in religion? And the person told me the soul is a secret of God, as if it's like to talk about the soul is like, is that blasphemy I smell? So the soul is the mystery, but it's also synonymous that it is like God's will imbued to man, right? As if we think of the concept of the demon and the angel is that which is literally God's free will. The angel doesn't have a free will. The human being has a free will, and then when you look at the demon archetype is ignoring a free will and divine will. Do you see? That's the difference. That's the demonic archetype. This is why a demonic person, it's very easy for them to see the world burn, right? Because they're not caring for the middle ground and the higher ground. Do you know? But the idea is that everything in nature is the will of one giant universal event, right? It's as if like we are thinking, oh my God, look at how much stuff there is in existence. But imagine if there was eyes in the eyes of the Creator in higher dimensions, and this whole life is just a single brushstroke on the canvas. Do you know? Please tell me this isn't on mute. Okay. All that a temporary being can do be like, yo, am I eternal? You know, and all an eternal being can do is like, hey, can I be temporary? You know, I feel like going into a quote tunnel of a Sufi poet by the name of Hafez. Hafez is a Persian poet and Sufi mystic, and many people don't know this about the country of Iran, but there was a certain point where the culture was under attack from invading nations, and the invaders, which were the Mongol Empire, this is the history of the nation, like as if every history has a past, you know, every nation has a past. And so in some sense, the Mongolian Empire would destroy and burn, as if like there were some conquerors that they would conquer an empire, but they wouldn't burn it to the ground, right? But the Mongols were kind of like the burning to the ground type, right? And so these very wise poets suddenly saw the culture of the time being destroyed, and through their poetry, they attempted to keep the truths of the moment in life. Right, and I'm going to read for you one of these poets by the name of Hafez. He says, even after all this time, the sun never says to the earth, you owe me. Look what happens with a love like that. It lights the whole sky. And you know, guys, I've shared the metaphor that an advanced civilization will be like a sun, like a miniature sun that is coming closer and closer and eventually landing on the surface of the earth. Hafez says, I have learned so much from God that I can no longer call myself a Christian, a Hindu, a Muslim, a Buddhist, a Jew. There's more to the quote, guys. I don't know why this website isn't sharing, but he says, okay, let me find that whole full poem. These are like fragments of his poems that I'm reading. Okay, there we go, guys. I found the full poem. Hafiz says, I have learned so much from God that I can no longer call myself a Christian, a Hindu, a Muslim, a Buddhist, a Jew. The truth has shared so much of itself with me that I can no longer call myself a man, a woman, an angel, or even a pure soul. Love has befriended Hafiz so completely it has turned to ash and freed me of every concept and image my mind has ever known. That means there is a truth here that not only surpasses human personality, but it frees the individual from themselves. You know, I think it's a wise thing to say that if a person can hate others, then most likely there will come a moment where their psychology will go within and they will hate themselves, right? And it's important that our outer life and inner life are in sync. Hafiz says, don't be surprised at fortune's turns and twists. That wheel has spun 1,000 yarns before. Hafiz says, O cupbearer, set my glass afire with the light of wine. Hafiz says, I once asked a bird, how is it that you fly in this gravity of darkness? She responded, love lifts me. Hafiz says, now that all your worry has proved such an unlucrative business, why not find a better job? Hafiz says, join me in the pure atmosphere of gratitude for life. Hafiz says, when all your desires are distilled, you will cast just 2 votes to love more and be happy. Hafiz says, carry your heart through this world like a life-giving sun. And I guess I'll end there, guys. That's the most important thing. That ultimately, regardless of our philosophy, regardless of our convictions of the outer realms, regardless of how convinced we are of truth, when we forget the unknown, wars begin. The unknown is the greatest union of mankind. all branches of knowledge are kind of like in response to the unknown. In the subtitle, I've written eternity's role in man's mind. By man, I mean just the human design. And so, it's as if, why does the idea of eternity exist? I mean, I've shared so much about it so far, but I'm asking the question again, and it's like, why do we even in society have the concept of eternity? Right? And how is it that which is beyond abstraction? Because the abstraction is based on the object is temporary, so our imagination should technically be temporary, right? So how can there be an eternal vision? And perhaps there can be an eternal witnessing. As the Vedas say, the seer of the seen is unseen. Right now, right, everything I'm saying that the listener is hearing, it is not only entering your inner realms, but it is animating in your inner realms, because that's the nature of sound. Anything we hear, it's as if Sadhguru says, the content of your mind is not your choice. And so imagine you're selfless and somebody says the content of your mind is not your choice, and you'll be like, buddy, I know. Because the knower is not contained. That means truth is unconditional, yet all our approaches towards it has been through conditions of the circumstances of just how civilization has walked. Right? There's so many ideological systems that it's as if we have to filter them out in regards to which ideological system's destination is human. Right? Not ideological systems care for the human idea. You know? Upon an elemental stage, an object that has evolved to become a subject to itself wonders if beyond how it is a subject, the whole objective reality is timeless. That means a timeless universe will mean a universe where either change is not recorded, there is no concept of time, or in some sense there is no concept. And so human psychology, I'm pretty sure like in the next decade or in the next couple decades, there's going to arise philosophers who are going to wonder about not only where the winds of evolution go, but about at what point is human psychology it's like pretty much philosophers are going to wonder if humanity goes on a sort of strange path of no longer being human, then what was the point of civilization, right? That means we can all, like in the future, imagine transfer our consciousness into robots and say, yeah, we are immortal human consciousness, but the human body is long gone, you know? You know, we can artificially attain some sort of immortality that way, but I will tell you it is a waste. It is in some sense impossible, right? Because it's kind of like a movie. The film finishes, and it finishes for everybody. Right? But the world, the beyond, like that means if our mind was a simulation and the world is being said to be a simulation, so our mind is a simulation inside a simulation, and if the world is inside another simulation, as if God's dream, then it's as if we have to get out of 3 simulations, you know? And I feel strangely in Christianity, the concept of the Son, the Father, and the Holy Ghost. The Son, the Holy Ghost, and the Father, I would say that sort of hierarchy, you know. It's as if that's the algorithm. That's the algorithm to no longer thinking there is a Logos, when you realize it's just the life of the world. You know, it's like while we are alive as egos, at the same time the planet is alive through us, you know. It's as if, imagine extraterrestrials landed on Earth and they wanted to invade Earth, and all the trees and animals attacked that extraterrestrial. As if the extraterrestrial was like, even if we wanted to stay here, the whole planet wants us out. You know what I mean? How crazy would that be? The trees are fighting aliens because they care for humanity. That would be the most epic backup system. Imagine in the future we've planted sequoia trees everywhere, and in case if there's an alien invasion, these sequoia trees turn into giant robots and defend humanity. Oh man. The attention can pilot in so many ways in the space-time continuum, you know? And one can say there's so many ways to live, right? You can live thinking you're a temporary creature. You can live, for example, feeling you're an eternal witness. I personally, anytime I speak or anytime there's individual activity, I'm just a simple person. That's it. That's as far as the psychology in the outer realms goes. But in the inner realms, when I am, for example, sitting in nature, in solitude, and with a conscious effort, not effort, but with just consciousness, you know, sometimes when I go into nature, in my inner realms, I already see myself sitting somewhere, and I just go sit there, you know. Like I would say, after a person, you know how some people say the logos told me. They say the logos like whispered into the ear of mankind or something, you know. So, but I'll tell you, that's a very strange relationship. Let me tell you why. Because after you go through a phase where the divine is communicating to you through language, then the divine begins to communicate to you, just in a theological context, through images. So the superior dimensions beyond the truths that language keeps. It's as if there are films beyond our eyes that we don't even have language for. So then I would say the higher dimensional approach is that in the attempt of, let's say, a square becoming a cube, not only does the square have to acknowledge its opposite, the plane and the other dimension, but has to acknowledge all the other planes, right? And you know what that means? Imagine like the soul was cubic and the mind was two-dimensional. Okay, the mind was a square, and so this mind's like, yo man, I want to reach my soul's truth, you know. I've been raised that way. And so the person, the 2D mind's approach has to be like, okay, a dualistic mind, it's like whatever reality you're in, you visualize the opposite, then you have to visualize two other dimensions and their opposites. That means if all of human thought has been in a vertical dimension, we're like, oh shit, there's two other horizontal dimensions, you know, in a 3D context. So what I mean is that once, and imagine, I don't know, guys, if the wind is trying to tell me something. Imagine that there were 5 other parallel realities in a cubic universe, parallel Earth dimensions. And in all of those 5 other parallel dimensions, they had all built an advanced civilization, and we were the only advanced civilization left, the only... Hang on, guys. The wind is distracting. Just hang on. pretty much the idea that we're the only parallel Earth that needs to hurry up. Not hurry up, but to kind of get caught and catch up to speed. And guys, when I say build an advanced civilization, it's like we accept the simplest options, which is failure. That means we're like, okay, let's say that we can't build an advanced civilization, but if the only way we can know if we can build one is if we try. So if 8 billion human beings, let's say, attempted to build an advanced civilization, they would have to first build the inner workings, the atmospheres of mind that the advanced civilization provides. Right? That means imagine you're walking in a city and the city is in some sense dirty and structures are broken, or like they're all the same shape, and so the sidewalks are small, and they're beside the roads for some reason, as if sidewalks should have their own lanes, like not on the side of streets, Probably we need a three-dimensional approach, but that means like sidewalks being above cars. That would be pretty messed up. I mean, it's better than cars being above the sidewalk. Imagine in the future, in not an advanced civilization, but let's say in a civilization where they have this invisible force field bridge above like streets as a sort of crosswalk, and imagine in the middle of this invisible force field bridge that every day you've walked on, suddenly in the middle it drops and there's a highway of cars passing by underneath, and so you just fall into a convertible, there's no point of just having the idea of an advanced civilization, by the way. It means it's like somebody said advanced civilization, great. But the whole thing is, how does the whole system align? And of course the system is designed with freedom of every person's inner realm. That means the Universal Declaration of Human Rights pretty much says every person is free to be human, but our humanity has to be aligned with global status quo at least. And what I mean by this is that it's like the nations are like kids in a classroom, and some kids are bullying other kids. So one kid is like a straight A student. One kid is kind. One kid is cruel. So many different psychologies. One kid is shy. There's some nations right now that have no voice, or maybe their voice isn't even being considered in the global affair of things, right? And so it's very important that we create. That means it's as if the United Nations was created in 1948, and now we need a more advanced global network where ideas on multiple levels of societal existence are being shared. That means imagine a future UN, like UN to the power of 2, where this UN to the power of 2 is a United Nations that is considering a unity of being. What that means is it's like we're just humans. We're just creatures like getting by in the world in the most simplest natural level. But in the most unnatural level, we're a sophisticated animal, and anytime we're in a political system, we are technically a political animal, And so there's many variables and various ways, and it's like, honestly, it's like every person's free will is like a different brushstroke on the canvas of what can be done in the void, There's a quote by Attar I want to read for the audience, and then I'll end this off, and those interested, I'll be on Discord if anybody has questions. Attar has a quote where he talks about eternity, And this is the incredible quote from Attar of Nishapur, one of the great, I would say, Persian poets, Sufi mystics. Farid al-Din Attar, he says, the home we seek is in eternity. The truth we seek is like a shoreless sea, of which your paradise is but a drop. This ocean can be yours. Why should you stop, beguiled by dreams of evanescent dew? The secrets of the sun are yours. But you content yourself with motes trapped in its beams. Turn to what truly lives, reject what seems. Which matters more, the body or the soul? Be whole. Desire and journey to the whole. So guys, this quote from Attar is the ultimate, I would say, when it comes to mystical experience. I'm just freaking out. It's a really windy day today, guys. I apologize on behalf of the wind. But the winds of evolution are beyond man. That means there's forces at work in the realm that one cannot try to overthrow, cannot try to dominate, cannot try to control. All they can do is honor coexistence. You know? Because if in the future, let's say like a very compassionate, advanced extraterrestrial species comes to Earth, and they're like, yo, we're from this neighboring planet, we just invented this technology, you know, we came to you guys, and we want to start diplomatic interstellar relationships. And we'll be like, holy shit, man, we never thought this day would come, you know. And so imagine humanity begins some sort of diplomatic relationship in some sci-fi hypothetical scenario in the future, where extraterrestrials from that planet are coming to live on Earth, and human beings on Earth are going there, as if a diplomatic relationship between civilizations between different planets, right? That means right now people are still are suffering with communication, just like on Earth, right? We got to kind of like update that quickly, and eventually prepare for potential galactic scenarios. You know, they're kind of like event. It's like fireworks. You know, you notice it when you hear it and see it. Attar says, let love lead your soul. Make it a place to retire to. A kind of monastery cave, a retreat for the deepest core. Of your being. The moment cannot die, but what's in it changes. Thank you for listening, guys. I hope this was a helpful episode. Namaste. And a final statement. Love is the freedom that the eternal remember. Thanks for listening, guys.